Hey there, welcome to another episode of Moandain Designs. I'm your host Moandain. This video is part of my favorites series, and today we're going to be talking about the TurboGrafx 16/PC engine. Growing up in my neighborhood, we actually, were a bunch of kids that were growing up in the bit wars, basically the 16-bit generation. I had one neighbor that actually turned around and bought the Sega Genesis and a bunch of the games, and there was a couple of games on that I actually enjoyed. Mainly like X-Men, stuff like that. And then I had another neighbor that bought the Super Nintendo, and so every time that we went over to that house, we would play on that. So I decided to be the one that kind of went against the grain and didn't pick Nintendo or Sega, and I picked a TurboGrafx 16. I thought it was a really innovative system. I liked how small it was. I liked how the games were a little bit off the beaten path, and that was it. I mean, I started off just because all the other kids had the other systems, and I wanted something that nobody else had, and so I picked the TurboGrafx 16. I went to Toys R Us back in the day when they had them, and I picked one up, and I even went back a couple of years later and picked up the CD drive for it as well. And I've never really regretted it. I've always enjoyed it. I did regret not purchasing those other systems until later in life. But, I was a kid. I didn't make that much money on allowance, so I had to, pick my battles. So let's go ahead and get into some of my favorite games. Aerial Blasters was released in 1990 by Conoco. I really love this game. This game actually has more than just a special place. I have some, good memories attached with this. I bought this game specifically because one of the movie theaters that me and my dad went to back when I was a little kid had this deal where if you got the high score on a particular arcade game that they had, you would actually score 2 movie tickets, and it was pretty easy. So I actually got this game and got really good at Aerial Blasters because that movie theater had a copy of the arcade version of the game, which isn't that much different from the TurboGrafx 16 version, although I think the TurboGrafx 16 version actually has better music than the original arcade. But so that's what I would do, is I would just show up one Saturday with me and my dad. He would give me a quarter, and I would proceed to just barely beat my high score from last weekend. And we would get 2 movie passes and go see a movie. It was just a really fond memory for me. On to the next one is Blazing Lasers. Yes, it's another shoot 'em up. It's released in 1989 by Hudson Soft. This is another one where I believe, all of these games, you should have if you're going to have a TurboGrafx 16. Some of them are expensive. Blazing Lasers is a little bit more on the pricey side, if I remember correctly. But it's just another good shmup, and there's a lot of really good shmups on the TurboGrafx 16. Now, one of the games I like that I'm about to mention is one that is not loved by everybody. In fact, there's a lot of people that give it some pretty bad reviews, but I still enjoyed it. It's Double Dungeon, released in 1990 by NEC. This is like a first-person dungeon exploring game where you went around and bought equipment and ran into things like snakes and slimes and harpies and all kinds of other, fantasy things that you were trying to defeat. And then at the end of a dungeon, you would run into the boss, and then you would move on to the next dungeon. I liked this game a lot, especially because it had a two-player mode, and you could either help your person or you could actually hunt each other down. So it was kind of left up to the players whether or not it was going to be PvP or not. But it was a really fun game for me. I enjoyed it quite a bit. You should be able to find it relatively cheap because of a lot of the bad reviews. But like I said, I enjoyed it. The next thing is a pack-in game. This actually came with my TurboGrafx 16. It's Final Lap Twin, released in 1990 by Namco. This was like one of my early racing games that I enjoyed quite a bit. I liked Rad Racer 1 and 2, and kind of fell off the racing game scene after that for a while until Final Lap Twin came out. I actually like Final Lap Twin, even though it is a pack-in game. It should be really cheap. Like, I wouldn't expect to pay more than $5 for a complete copy of this game. But there's two modes of way to play this game. There's just the race mode where you're playing the F1 cars and you're racing around the track, and that's it. You don't get to do anything else. You just race and that's it. Then there's the off-road mode where you're basically playing a racing RPG. You can run around on a map and get random encounters, and you can buy parts for your car and do all sorts of other stuff. And it's just a lot of fun. The game takes, the RPG side of the game actually takes quite a while to get through. So it does pay to have pen and paper and actually go through and just write down your save code and stuff. If I remember right, I think that's one of the few games that has the save code that did not work with the internal memory for the CD-ROM drive. Another one, the game gets a lot of criticism because it's essentially a rip-off of Zelda, is Newtopia, released in 1990 by Hudson Soft. I liked Newtopia because I really liked how vibrant the colors were. I was never really a Zelda fan, which kind of sounds funny, because essentially Newtopia and Zelda are the same thing. But I got through this game, and it was joy. I mean, I loved some of the maps. I loved how I guess the game wasn't overhyped in my mind. Way too many people thought that Zelda was the end-all be-all, and I don't know, I got tired of hearing it, and so I just never, back then I never gave that series a second thought. But Newtopia was new, no one was talking about it, and it's just great. I loved it. I wish I had Newtopia too, but I cannot pay that price. Maybe one day I can, find a cheap copy if I keep looking for it. It is on my radar to pick up, but for right now, I'm just going to keep playing Newtopia 1 when the mood strikes. Another great game is Superstar Soldier. It's released in 1990 by Hudson Soft. It's another shmup. It's really just good. I'm always impressed with all of the shmups on the TurboGrafx 16. If you see a shoot 'em up on the TurboGrafx 16, it's probably going to be good. You're probably going to enjoy it. It was just one of those staples that the system did really well. Now, I know that I'm mainly just mentioning cue card games, and I'm probably going to do an episode later about the CD games that I actually enjoy, because I personally believe that those are technically a separate system. So, go ahead and look forward to that. Now, we're going to go over some of the cables needed. If you get a TurboGrafx 16, don't worry about the RF connector. You can actually, there's like a large pin connector on the back, and I'm going to be showing on the screen somewhere where there's the pin out for the pin connector on the back, and it's relatively easy, and people actually make connectors to plug into the back so that you can get the composite video. And it's really just, a good thing to have. A couple of other things to look for when you're purchasing this system. So you definitely need to get the power adapter. And let me go ahead and read exactly what the power should be. The specs for the original TurboGrafx power adapter are input AC 120 volts, 60 hertz, 15 watts. Output DC 10.5 volts, 350 milliamps. Polarity inner plug negative, outer positive. Now that's not a very common one to come across. In fact, it's very hard. Definitely do not buy a system unless it comes with the AC adapter. And if you're going to buy it anyways, I would seriously look at whatever's on price charting and cut that price in half, because that power adapter is going to be hard to find. Let's see. The other things to remember is that the TurboGrafx 16 and the PC Engine are actually region locked from each other. So there are mods out there where they're auto switching, and there's mods where you can press a button on the side and it changes the pinouts for the Hue card reader. My favorite thing is an adapter. I actually have one of these old ugly adapters that's got some purple plastic on it and stuff, but I don't have to crack apart the system or anything like that, and I really like it. Another thing to note is the system only has one player port, so you actually have to buy a multi-tap to enable multiple players, so that's another thing to look out for. A couple of the other things, the CD drive, a lot of them are falling into disrepair because of the infamous white middle gear. There is a couple of websites that I'm going to put in my description below of where you can actually find replacements for that. The capacitors go bad in the CD-ROM drive itself. So if the sound is dropping or something like that, you might be able to either do it yourself or pay someone else to replace the capacitors. And then there's a couple of other things like the Turbo Boost and the Turbo Boost Express. Turbo Boost Plus. Sorry about that. So the Turbo Boost is basically just something that plugs into the back of the system, and it allows you to have composite. And it looks nice, but it's just composite, and that's all it does. And you can actually build that yourself really cheap. Now if you're trying to collect it, more power to you. The Turbo Boost Plus is one of those things that's a little bit more sought after. Yes, it is, again, just composite out, but composite out, sorry. But it's also has the internal memory that the CD-ROM drive has as well. So, I mean, that's worth a little bit more. The other thing is just the basic clamp-on clamshell thing that goes on the back that kind of smooths out the system so that it doesn't have, something, that large port basically sticking out of the back. Now the PC Engine is, not really released over here in the States. They're not excessively hard to find, but, again, if you wanted to play US games, you would either have to mod it or use one of the adapters. Honestly, I believe that the TurboGrafx 16 is a wonderful system, and I enjoy it quite a bit. So, good luck. Hope that you guys can find some worthwhile games out there. Well, that's it for this episode of Moandain Designs. I'm your host, Moandain, and I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed making it. If you like what you see, support me on my channel on Patreon by clicking one of the links below. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Have a wonderful day.